Hello, my lovely. Today I have a list of all of the series that I have started and not finished. And let me tell you, there are a lot. So stay tuned. So I have gone through my shelves, all 12 floor to ceiling shelves, and looked at all of the series that I have started at some point and not finished. Now this doesn't include books that like I started and like unhauled or anything like that. These are books that I own and that I've started and that I own more of the series and never finished. And I was surprised by how many there were. Because of the extent of this list, I've not pulled them all off my shelves. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm just gonna scoot this way, and then I'm going to put on the screen the picture of like the first book from each of these series. Future editing me is gonna hate me, but that's what I'm gonna do instead of pulling all of these books off my shelves. So the first series that I want to mention, actually I should start off with telling you there are 95 series. I know. There are a couple of those that are graphic novel series, but a lot of them are just regular novel series, and I just couldn't believe it. Okay, because there's so many, I'm just gonna jump right in, and I'm not gonna give a whole lot of information about each series. I'm just kind of gonna go through the list with you. So the first series that I have on my list here is The Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. And I believe I read the entire first book. I know I started it and I got a good way through it, but life just kind of got chaotic and I didn't continue. Okay, next up is the Ember in the Ashes series by Sabata here. I read the first two books in this series and never got around to reading the rest of them. I own the first four. I'm not sure if there's any more than that, but I own the first four, and I decided that I wanted to put it off and wait until I could read these with Marty, because I think they're going to be ones that he's really going to enjoy, and I really enjoyed those first two books. So yeah. Next up is Clicked by Tamara Ireland Stone. This is, I think it's just a duology, and I own the first two books. I've read the first one. It's a cute middle grade. I loved it, and I was gifted the second one. I just haven't gotten around to reading it yet. Next is The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. So I read The Raven Boys years ago, and I can't remember. I think I was listening to the audiobook of it and I just didn't click with it, and I wanted to give it another chance because I have the series and I know that like a lot of people absolutely love this series, so I wanted to give it another chance at some point in the future where I was physically reading it, because I'm focusing more on it. So yeah, I've only read the first book of that series. Next up is probably one that'll be a bit of a surprise, and that is Scythe by Neal Shusterman. Marty and I read the first two books and freaking loved them. Like, they are so good. And we never read The Toll, which is the last book. And I honestly don't know why we never got around to reading that one. I guess it's because we were reading other books or life or whatever. But I love Neal Shusterman's writing. I've loved everything that I've read by him so far. And the Scythe series is probably my favorite of his. And yeah, it blows my mind that I haven't finished that yet. Okay, so this next one, actually, this is number 6 on my list, but then there's another that kind of goes with it, which is number 39 on my list, and I'll just go ahead and say them both now. These are ones that my friend Clint's going to be really disappointed in, and that is Killing November by Adriana Mather and How to Hang a Witch by Adriana Mather. I think this is his favorite author, I think, of all time, maybe. I know he loves Adriana Mather and he loves these series. And I've read the first in each of them. I think they're both duologies, but I've read the first book in each of them and really enjoyed them and just never got around to reading the second one, which I own the second one of both. Okay, the next thing on my list is The Program by Suzanne Young. This is a series that Marty and I just started in December, and we really enjoyed the first book, and that's all I've read of it is the first book. And I do want to continue, but there's other things that I want us to read together before then, so it may be a minute. Next up is Slayer by Kirsten White, and I read the first one and I enjoyed it. I did have some issues with it, but I still wanted to continue, and I have the next book, which is Chosen, and I haven't read that one yet. Okay, next up is New World by Jennifer Wilson. This is a dystopian and it was so much fun. I read the first book, which was like, I think, New World Rising, and I immediately bought the rest in the series because I loved that first book so much, but then I never read them. Okay, next is one that I have fairly recently started, and that is the Ravenspire series by C.J. Redwine. And I've read the first 2 books in that series. I'm not entirely sure how many books are in the series, but I read, I think it's The Shadow Queen and The Wish Granter, I believe. And I've loved them, so I'm looking forward to continuing with that as well at some point. I want to continue all of these at some point, but there's a lot. Okay, next on my list is Last Reality by Jason Segel and Kristen Miller. I think the first book is Otherworld, which is like a virtual reality type book, and it was a lot of fun. I actually got it to meet the authors and got it signed, and I have the next 2 books, I think, in that series, but I haven't read them yet. Next up is Monsters of Verity by Victoria Schwab. I read this Savage Song and loved it and just never got around to reading, I think it's the Dark Duets or These Dark Duets or something like that. But yeah, I love the first book, never got around to the second book. I apparently have a problem with actually finishing series. Next we have the Cassie Blake series by Victoria Schwab. Read the first 2 and absolutely loved them, and have the third one but haven't read it yet. I don't know if there's any more than that, but I just haven't read the last one. And then there's Aristotle and Dante by Benjamin Alire Sainz, and I read the first one and I honestly don't remember too much about it, but I do have an ARC of the second one. I think it's an ARC. Maybe it was a finished copy. It was one that I won in a giveaway. And so I wanted to go back and reread the first one since I don't remember it, and read the second one at some point. Then we have York by Lauren Ruby. This is a middle grade series, and they are chunky books. I read the first one and immediately wanted the others because it was such a cool story and I loved it. And then I never read them. I think I have the first 3 books in the series, and like I said, I've only read the first one. Okay, this next one is kind of a sort of. Okay, so it's Divergent by Veronica Roth. However, let me say, I did actually finish the original trilogy. Like, I've read those books. What I haven't read is 4. Which is like the extra book, like the novella that came after. And so that's why it's on the list. So it's on the list, but sorta. Okay, next up is a book that I read at some point in 2021. I can't remember exactly when. But that was Story Thieves by James Riley. And I only read the first book and absolutely loved it, and it's like fairy tales and all of that, and it was so much fun. I don't know how many books in that series. I have like 3 or 4, I'm not entirely sure, but again, I've only read the first one. Theme. Okay, this next one is another one of those sort of. It's Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer. I have read the original, like 5, I think it is. I've read all the way through Winter, but the only thing I haven't read was that extra book, Stars Above. That's why it's in this sort of category. Okay, next up is a series that I started, and I read quite a few of them, but I stopped. I don't even really remember why I stopped, but I want to go back and reread all of these with my buddy read group at some point in the future, and that is the Keeper of the Lost City series by Shannon Messenger. So I actually read the first 5 books in this series. At this point, I think there are 8 books, but I know that there's a 9th one coming out, I believe this year, and then I know that there's going to be at least 10 in the series. I don't know if there's going to be more than that or not. But yeah, I've read through the first 5 and I love it. It's such a great series. And it is middle grade and it's so much fun. Next up is Renegades by Marissa Meyer. I read the first book, Renegades, and I was kind of surprised by it because I wasn't really expecting to like it as much as I did, because I wasn't really thinking that superheroes was my kind of thing. But I loved it. Like, I absolutely loved it. And so I have the rest of the series, but I haven't read them. Okay, next up is the Twilight series by Stephanie Meyer. And again, this is, well, I guess it kind of fits with the sorta. I read the original series, but I have not read Midnight Sun, which is the newest book, or this novella that I own, which is called The Short Second Life of Bree Tanner. So I haven't read either of those. So technically I haven't finished the series, but I think there's actually more books that are coming out from what it looks like here on Goodreads, that there are going to be at least 2 more that come out past Midnight Sun. Okay, next up is the Fever series by Karen Marie Mooney, and I read this years and years and years ago. Hold on, let me see if I can tell you how many books are in that series. Okay, so there are 11 primary works in that series, and I think maybe I've only read the first 3, which was like the Danny O'Malley trilogy. So yeah, it started as a trilogy and expanded to 11 books. I think that's as far as I read in it. But this was many years ago, like many years before I did book 2 that I read this. And it actually took me a long time to figure out what this series was, because I was searching for it. So I could go back and read it because I loved it. And it's vampires and all of that. Okay, next up is the Savior series by Jenna Morrissey. Now, if you watched my top 10 of 2021, you know that the Savior's Champion was my #1 for the year. I absolutely loved it. I immediately ordered the second book, or I pre-ordered the second book, and I haven't read it yet. Granted, it's only been since, I think it was over the summer maybe, that Marty and I read Savior's Champion. So I mean, it's not like it's been years since I've read it, but yeah, I have the second book and I haven't read it yet. Another one that I started in 2021 was the Faith Herbert Origin series by Julie Murphy. I read the first one, Faith Taking Flight. I pre-ordered the second one, and it's arrived, but I haven't read it yet. And then I have Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Nang, and I read the first book, loved it. I have the second book, I believe. I don't know if I own the third book or not. I don't think I do, but I haven't read that one either. Okay, next is one that I was actually supposed to start in January, and so I have it on the list because I was like, okay, well, by the time I film this, I will have started it, because it was on my January TBR. but at this point in time I haven't, and it's rolling over into my February TBR, but it'll still count as having started and not finished, and that is the Nevermore series by Kelly Krieg. As I said, I was supposed to have read the first book in January, and now it's gotten pushed to February, so it will be one that gets completed, and I'm hoping to continue with that series and actually get it completed this year. Fingers crossed. Okay, next up is one that I'm almost done with, and it's one I've only recently started reading, and that is the Green Creek series by TJ Klune. So up to this point, I have read Wolf Song, Raven Song, Love Song Part 1, Heart Song, Feral Song, Love Song Part 2, and I am currently working on the last book, which is Brother Song. So I don't know if this will be finished by the time this video posts, but at this point in time, it's a series that I've started and have not finished. Though when I wrote this down, I hadn't started that book yet. Okay, so this next one is another one kind of like Nevermore, where I was supposed to start it in January, and so I had it on my list, but it doesn't look like it's gonna get done in January, and so it's gotten rolled over to February, but it's still getting started, so I'm counting it. And that is Queen of Hearts series, or Queen of Hearts Saga by Colleen Oakes. And as I said, I haven't actually read any of it, but I will be reading the first book in February. Next up is the Bromance Book Club. So at this point, there are 4 books in this series, and I have read the first 2. I can't remember when exactly I read the first one, but I read the second one in January. And I'm hoping to read books 3 and 4 in February, though a 5th book is set to come out in November, which I absolutely want to read come December, because it's like a very merry bromance or something like that. But I will have actually completed this by the end of February, hopefully. And that also goes for this next series, which is Letters to the Lost by Bridget Kimmer. This is a duology, and I'm currently reading the first book in that series right now. And then in February, we're buddy reading the second book in that series. So that's one that I'm pretty sure I'm gonna get finished. Okay, this next one is another one of those sort of. It is the Delirium series by Lauren Oliver, and I read the 3 books that are the trilogy. However, there is a little novella called Delirium Stories, Hannah, Annabelle, and Raven, and I have not read that little novella. I own it, but I haven't read it, so that's why I'm counting this one as a sort of. Okay, next is Dreamfall by Amy Plum. As far as I know, that is a duology. It's Dreamfall and Neverwake, and I think it was in 2021 that I read Dreamfall, and I really enjoyed it, but I never got around to reading Neverwake. I bought it after reading Dreamfall, but yeah, never got around to reading it. Next is another duology. This is the Glitter series by April Lynn Pike, and I read Glitter. That was fun. Glitter is a drug in this book, and I never got around to reading the second book, which is Shatter, but I do own it. Next is a Blade So Black series. I read the first one. Oh, and this is by L.L. McKinney. I read the first one. I own the second one. I do not own the third one yet. Oh wait, the third one doesn't come out until 2023. Okay, so yeah, of the ones that are out, I've read one and haven't read the other. Okay, next is the Wayward Children series by Shauna McGuire. I read the first 4 books and was obsessed. I loved like everything that I read. I own the 5th book, but never got around to reading it. And at this point, I think in January, like earlier this month, the 7th book came out. So I don't own the 6th or 7th book yet. But yeah, I've loved all of those books and really need to get the rest and finish the series. Next is the Thousandth Floor series by Catherine McGee. This is a 3-book series, and I've read the first 2, but never got around to reading the third one, so I need to read that. Okay, next is a cute middle grade series. I think I read the first book with Xander, and it was well, the series is called The Misadventures of Edgar and Allan Poe, and I think they're like great-great-grandnephews of Edgar Allan Poe, and they're twins. And the first book was A Telltale Start, and it was super cute, and I have the other 2 books, but I have not read them yet. Okay, next up is Stalking Jack the Ripper series by Carrie Maniscalco, and I read the first book, and I think I gave it 4 stars. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and I own the rest of the series, but I haven't read any of it past that first book. Then there's The Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell. I think maybe this is just a duology, but I could be wrong. I only own at least the first 2 books anyway. I've read The Last Magician, but I have not read, I think it's called The Devil's Thief. And some of you may not know this, but The Giver by Lois Lowry is actually the first book in the series. There are 4 books in that series, and there's also a graphic novel of The Giver. I have read The Giver, and I have read the graphic novel of The Giver, but I have not read the rest of the series, and would really like to read that at some point because I absolutely love The Giver. Okay, before I continue, I need to change my battery because it's flashing, so I'll be right back. Okay, sorry if the angle changed. All right, next up is, oh, let me scoot back over so I can put the books up here. Okay, next up is The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. This is one that I read many years ago. I read the first book back when I was in like I think I was in middle school when I read the first book. And I loved it so much. And then when I discovered that they were going to make a movie, like one of the newer movies, this was in early 2000s. Becca really wanted to see it, and I really wanted to see it, and so I was like, okay, we're gonna read the book before we watch the movie. And so we read the book, like reread the first book, and we went and we watched the movie. And then she loved the book too, and so I ended up buying a bind up of the entire Chronicles of Narnia series. And we continued reading, but I honestly don't remember how far into it that we got. I don't think that we ever finished it. So I'd really love to finish that. I watched, when I was either late middle school or early high school, there was like a movie series on like PBS or something that actually had movies for the Chronicles of Narnia, and I remember watching all of those original ones when I was like homesick with strep throat or something like that, and I loved them. And so yeah, I really want to read the books. And if there are more movies, because I don't know if they made any more movies or not, I have to look, but if there are more movies, I definitely want to go and watch those. Okay, next up is Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim. I read the first book in this series, and I have the second book. I think there's a third book out now, but I'm not entirely sure. It's Mulan meets Project Runway with a little bit of Aladdin thrown in there. I freaking loved it, and I got to meet Elizabeth Lim and get her to sign my books. But yeah, I haven't read the second one yet, so I definitely need to do that. This is another one that I read many years before I got involved with BookTube. I want to say when it first came out maybe, and that was Every Day by David Levithan. I read that one, and then I haven't read the others, which are like Someday and Another Day or something like that. I have all of them, but I haven't read those. Okay, next up is To Kill a Mockingbird series. So it's been a couple of years, I think, maybe 2-3 years since I read To Kill a Mockingbird, and I loved To Kill a Mockingbird. I gave it 5 stars, and I have the sequel to it, which came out in 2015, called Go Set a Watchman, and it's like one of our main characters all grown up now. But yeah, I haven't read that second one yet, and I would really like to. Then there is Winter Song by S.J. Jones. Again, I think this is a duology. I own both books. I've read the first one, haven't read the second one. Okay, so this next series is a little concerning for me because I just looked on Goodreads because I was checking to see how many I've read and how many books there are. So I own the first 3 books in the series, but it shows that there are 4 books. Now, I've read the first 2, and I haven't read the third one. But the 4th one, there's no information on. And apparently people have been asking, is it going to come out in 2015, 2016? Then there was a thing about 2018. And we're in 2022, and there's still no information. So this could be a series that just leaves us without a conclusion, which is very concerning. I hate when that happens. But out of the 3 that I own, I've read 2, so I still need to read the third one. And then I'm probably going to get really mad and unhaul them all, just because even though I really enjoyed them, if I can't finish the series, I'm going to be upset. Okay, next is the Truly Devious series by Maureen Johnson. So I apparently have the first book and the third book. I do not own the second or the 4th book, and I've only read the first one. I really, really loved the first one. I gave it 5 stars. It was so much fun. I need to get the second book though, so I can continue the series. And at this point, we are over the halfway mark on the series that I have not finished, or that I've started and haven't finished. Yeah. Okay, next up is the Iron Fae series by Julie Kagawa. I own the first 7 books in this series. As far as I can tell, there are 9 books. I don't know if that's going to be the last book, but the 9th book comes out this year. And yeah, there are... I've read 1 out of the 7 that I own. Loved it. Let me see what I rated it. I gave it 4 stars and wanted to continue, but don't know why I didn't. I don't know. But yes, I have the first 7 and really need to work on that one. Next is the Diabolic series by S.J. Kincaid. I own the first 2 books. There are currently 3 books out for it. I've read the first one. I haven't read the second one. That second one actually fairly recently came up in one of my Have I Read It's, meaning I've owned that second book for at least 3 years and haven't read it. Next is the Jane Hawk series by Dean Koontz. This, I've read there's like a little prequel novella. I read that, and I've read the first book in this series. There are 5 main books in the series, and I believe I own all of them, but I've only read the novella, like the prequel novella, and the first book. So I still have 4 books left to go on that one. Then there is the Left Behind series by Tim LaHaye and Jerry B. Jenkins. This series, gosh, I think I was reading, Marty and I were actually reading it together back in like 2011, 2012, and thoroughly enjoying it. I can't remember how far we got into the series because I wasn't doing anything on Goodreads at all at that point. I don't even know that I knew Goodreads existed, if it existed at that point. But I want to say we got through like 3 or 4 of the books in the series. Wow, and there are 13 books in this series. I think I own all the way through book 9. I want to say, I feel like we read through book 4 at least. I'm not certain. Then there is the Rebel Belle series by Rachel Hawkins. I read the first book. It kind of gave me like a debutante Buffy vibe, like a southern Buffy in a way, and I ended up giving it 4 stars and really enjoyed it. There are 3 books in the series, and I've read the first one but not the other 2. This next one is another one that Xander and I were reading together. It is The Magic Misfits by Neil Patrick Harris. super, super fun middle grade stories. There are 4 books in the series. I own the first 3, and Xander and I read the first 2. So we still need to read the 3rd one, and I have to get the 4th one. Next is the Reawakened series by Colleen Hoke. This consists of a prequel novella and 3 main books. I have read the prequel novella, and that's it. I have not read any of the actual series, but I own them all. Okay, so another one that I'm including in this because I know that I'm starting it. I technically haven't started it yet, but it came up in my Have I Read It 26, and it was the only book, so there was no vote for that time. And that's the After series by William R. Forestchen. So I am reading One Second After, which is the first book, in February. So there are 3 books in the series, so I need to read the other 2 at some point. Okay, next up is the Mother-Daughter Book Club by Heather Vogel Frederick, and there are 7 books in this series. I have read 6 of these 7 books, and I read them back to back. Why I didn't end up reading the 7th book when I was so close to the end, I have no idea. But yeah. I don't know. Next is the Outlander series by Diana Gabaldon, and I own the first 8 out of 9 books. The 9th book I think just came out in 2021 and I haven't gotten it yet because I didn't see the point in going ahead and getting it since I wasn't up to that point. At this point, I've only read the first 2 books in that series. I loved them both. I think I gave them both 4 stars. But they are big chunker books, so I don't know why I didn't continue when I was doing that. I started them, I think, over the summer, and oh, wait, maybe it was over the summer of 2020. I don't know, but yeah, I just haven't gone back to them. Then there's the Caraval series by Stephanie Garber. I read the first 2. There are 3 books, and I haven't read the last one. It's very much a theme. Like, there's a lot of series that I could have finished just by reading the last book, but I didn't. Then there is the Beautiful Creatures, or the Castor Chronicles by Cami Garcia and Margaret Stoll. And I read these prior to BookTube and prior to Goodreads, or using Goodreads. So I don't know how far into that series I got. I honestly don't think I finished it. And then there was like a spin-off that was like Dangerous Creatures, and I'm positive that I never read any of those. Okay, next is the Detective D.D. Warren series by Lisa Gardner. So I've only read the first book in that series, which is called Alone. And I own, okay, so I think I said there's 11 books in this series. I own book 1, book 2, book 5, and book 8. Yeah, so I'm missing a few in there. But I did enjoy the first book. I don't remember what I rated it. It's either 3.5 or 4 stars. I don't know if that's one that I will finish or not. I'm iffy on it. My goal is to get through as many of these as I can with either reading them or deciding to unhaul them. Next up is the Heart of Dread series by Melissa de la Cruz. I read the first book, which was Frozen. I think there's 2 more books in the series, which I own them both, but I haven't read them. Next is the Blue Blood series by Melissa de la Cruz. There are 7 main books in this series plus 2 novellas, so a total of 9. I own all of them except for book 5, which I'll have to get at some point. But I have only read the first 2 books in that series. Okay, so this next series is one that technically you don't have to read them like back to back. I actually read book 2 before even realizing that it was a series, but each book follows like different people in this city. But I do own now the first book, but there are 3 books in this series, and it's called the Breaking Point series by Jay Crownover. I've read, like I said, book 2, which was called Dignity, and gave it 4 stars. It was fun. And book 1 is called Honor. So I really want to go back and like read the first book and then go into the second one and then read the third one. Okay, so this next one is another series that Xander and I were reading together. It's the Wizards of Once series by Cressida Cowell. And we read the first book and he immediately wanted to read the second one, but the first one had only just come out. So I had to pre-order the second one, and we never got around to reading it. I actually own the second and third book at this point, but we haven't read them. And there are now 4 books total in the series. Next up is the Janie Johnson series. The first book is called The Face on the Milk Carton by Carolyn B. Cooney. There are 5 books in this series, and I have read the first 2. They're super short books, really interesting. I think the first one actually had a movie made about it. I don't know if the others did or not, but I gave the first 2 books 5 stars each and just never continued. Okay, next up is the Eldest Curses series by Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu. I own the first 2 books. I've read the first one, haven't read the second one. And the third book, I think is supposed to come out sometime in 2022. That's what I've heard. I think it used to say it on Goodreads, but it's not saying it now on when that's supposed to come out, so we'll see. My plan is actually to read those this year. Hopefully all of them. Hopefully the other comes out in time to read it too. Okay, next is The Last Hours by Cassandra Clare. There are 3 books, so there is a little 56-page ebook called The Penultimate Hours, which I have not read. And I guess it's like a prequel short story. But then book 1 is Chain of Gold, and I've read that. I own Chain of Iron, and then Chain of Thorns is expected to come out in November of 2022. So I'm hoping to complete all of those this year. Okay, this is another series that I think is going to end up frustrating me because it's Legacy of Orisha by Tomi Adeyemi. So I own the first 2 books. I've read the first one. I just recently did a reread of it, and I still need to read the second book. But I think originally book 3 was supposed to come out, I think, in 2019. And then there was like talk of it coming out in 2021. And it's now 2022. And if you look on Goodreads, there's absolutely no information at all about book 3. There's no title, there's no expected publication date, no synopsis, no book cover, nothing. So I'm a little concerned that this is another one that's just going to get left. And from what I hear, book 2 ends in a serious cliffhanger. And I'm afraid that that's going to just really make me upset and want to get rid of the whole series. Because I hate when a series just doesn't end. Like, they just never finish it. It's not cool, man. Okay, next is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. I've read the first one, loved the first one. I've heard not great things about the second one. Somebody actually gave me their copy because they're like, don't waste your money. And I was going to buddy read it last year, I think, but never got around to reading it. So I still need to I still need to read the second book. I don't know if there's going to be any more books past that or if it's just the 2 books, but I still need to read the second one. Next is the Kingdom on Fire series by Jessica Cluse. I have read the first book, which is Shadow Bright and Burning. There are 3 books in the series and I own all 3 of them. I just haven't read past the first book. Next is the Land of Stories series by Chris Colfer. I read the first one and it's like a fairy tale kind of thing and it was so much fun. I ended up giving it 5 stars. Absolutely loved it. There are 6 books in the series and I own the first 5, but I've only read the first one. I think it was early 2021, maybe possibly 2020 when I read it. But yes, I was just like, this is everything. I love it so much. And so I needed all of the books. Now I just need to read all of the books. Next is the Unremembered series by Jessica Brody, and I recently in December read Unremembered and really enjoyed it. And there are 3 books in the series. I think I own them all. There's Unforgotten and Unchained. I still need to read those. Then there's The Obsidian Tower by Melissa Caruso. I read the first one, absolutely loved it, and pre-ordered the second one. I don't know how many books are going to be in this series, but I haven't read the second one yet, and I need to because it was so good. I think I gave it 5 stars, the first book. Next is the Graceling Realm series by Kristen Cashore. I've read the first book, Graceling. I own books 2 and 3. Book 4 just came out in 2021, and I see that there is going to be a book 5, though there's no like projected date or anything like that for that one. But I have only read the first book in that series. Okay, next is the Pandava series by Roshani Chashki. This is another one that Xander and we were reading together. We read the first book and that was it. Funny enough, I own the second and the 4th book, but apparently I don't own the 3rd book, and then book 5 comes out in 2022. So yeah, I need to continue that fun little middle grade series as well. Then there's The Reader by Tracy Chee, and my mother is desperately waiting for me to finish this series. We read the first book together. It's a trilogy. We read the first book together, which is called The Reader, and she couldn't wait. So she went to her library and checked out the next 2 books and read them like back to back and was like, okay, when are you gonna read it? When are you gonna read it? I still haven't read it, and it's been probably over a year since we read that one together. So yeah, I've read the first book, need to continue. She'd be very happy. She's like, I'm still waiting to talk to you about this book or about these books. Next is the Diviner series by Libba Bray. So years ago, Marty and I, we read the Diviners. At least we read part of the Diviners, the first book, and then in January we read the first book again and realized that maybe we didn't finish it the first time we read it because there were things that we did not remember towards the end of the book. But that's the only book that I have read in that series, and so I do intend on continuing 1 book a month in that series, getting that one done. Next is The Darkest Minds by Alexandra Bracken, and oh my goodness, there are I think 5 books in that series. I read the first one, and then years later I reread the first one and read the second one, and I think that's as far as I've gotten, was just reading those first 2 books, and I really do enjoy them, but apparently I have a big problem with finishing series, so yeah. Next is the 3 Dark Crowns series by Kendar Blake. There is a prequel novella as well as 4 main books. I read the prequel novella and I've read the first 2 books, and then I own the 3rd book, but I do not own the 4th book yet. So I need to get the 4th book, and then I need to read books 3 and 4. Okay, next is the Folk of the Air series by Holly Black. I own book 1 and book 3, but I apparently don't own book 2, so I need to get that. And I read, or I listened to The Cruel Prince years ago, after I had had surgery, and I was pretty doped up at the time. So it kind of all blurred in my mind and I don't remember much about it. So I don't even think I marked it as read just because I didn't remember enough about it. But yeah, I need to reread that first book, get the second book, and then continue the series. And then there's the Modern Fairy Tale series by Holly Black as well. And I read the first book, which is Tithe, but I have not read the second or third book, even though I do own them. Next up is the Wizard of Oz series by L. Frank Baum. I can't remember the exact number. I want to say I think there's like 15 books in the Wizard of Oz series. I actually own a really nice box set where it like does a bind up of multiple stories in each book. And I've read the first volume, which had the first 3 books in the series. And that's as far as I got because I was buddy reading them with my group, and then we decided that I wanted them to read the Dorothy Must Die series before we go into the Wizard of Oz series. So they were reading that, and then this year we're also going to be reading the Wicked series by Gregory Maguire before we dive back into the Wizard of Oz series. Next up is The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I read the first book and loved it. There are now 3 books out, I believe, and I own the second book, but I don't own the third book just yet. Or maybe the third book hasn't come out. I think I've pre-ordered the third book. But yeah, I've only read the first one. Then there is the Dark Element series by Jennifer L. Armentrout. The first book is White Hot Kiss. There are 3 books in this series, and I've only read the first one, but gave it 4 stars. Loved it. And then there's the Storm and Fury series by Jennifer L. Armentrout, and I think there's 3 books out. I don't know if that's the entire series or if it's going to continue. But at this point there are 3 books, and I own all 3 books. But I've only read the first 2, I believe. Yes. Oh, and the series is called the Harbinger series. It gave both of the first 2 books 5 stars. It's phenomenal. And I really need to read the last book, which is Grace and Glory. And my battery is flashing again. We're getting very close to the end though, so let me change this battery out and I'll be right back. Okay, I am back. Next up is The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert. There are 2 books in this series. I read the first one. I haven't read the second one, but I do own it. And then there is like an extra book, like a companion that goes along with it called Tales of the Hinterland. Which I don't own that one. Then there's The 5 People You Meet in Heaven by Mitch Albom. It's a duology. I've read the first book and I haven't read the second one, though I do own it. Next is The Wrath and the Dawn duology by Renee Attier, and I read the first book, but I have not read the second book, but I do own it. And then there are some graphic novel series that I have started but not finished yet. The first one is Jim and the Holograms by Kelly Thompson. This is actually one that was part of my top 10 in 2021. Absolutely loved it. I do not own the second one, but I do own others in the series. I still need to get the second one, but I'm super excited to read this series. I absolutely love the first one. Then there is Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. I've only read the first in this graphic novel series, and again, I loved it. I have the first 3 books in that series, and I do plan on reading book 2 or volume 2 in February. The next graphic novel series I have here is the Babysitter Club graphic novel series by Raina Teglemeier, and some of them are by her and some of them are by Gail Galligan, and these are based on the Babysitter Club books by Ann M. Martin. There are 11 books currently in this graphic novel series. I have read the first one. I own book 2 and I own book 5. But yeah, I need to get more of them. Then there's the Fable series. Hold on. So it looks like there are 22 volumes in this series, plus at least one standalone novel. Yeah. I've read the first one. I own a couple of them. Let's see. I own book 1 to 7.5, 22, and the standalone novel. Because I've been finding them really cheap here and there, and so I've just been like grabbing them when I can find them on a really good deal. And so that's why I have like a weird selection. But I've read the first one, gave it 4 stars, really enjoyed it. I have the second one, so I need to at least read that one. And then I'll have to get the third before continuing on. Okay, next up is Giant Days by John Allison. There are 14 volumes plus one standalone novel. And I own the first 7 volumes and the standalone. I'm not entirely sure how many I've read. Apparently I only marked the first 2 read on Goodreads, but I know I read more than that. I want to say that I at least read through volume 5, I believe. But I will probably go back and reread all of them. That's just a fun kind of slice of life graphic novel, and I don't know why. It's hard to explain why I enjoy it, but I really, really do. And the last series that I have here that I've started and not finished, it's actually a duology graphic novel series, and that is Heavy Vinyl. So I've read the first one, which is Riot on the Radio, and I have not read Y2KO, but it's like an undercover girl vigilante team, and it's awesome. But yeah, those are all 95 of the series that I've started and not finished. Why don't you comment down below ones that you think that maybe I should prioritize and try to get knocked out as soon as possible. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a big thumbs up. If you'd like to see more videos like this, click that subscribe button down below. And until next time, remember to always be completely you. Bye!